Okay, good morning Queensland, and a big hello to all of our Facebook followers as well. Welcome. And today we have further good news for Queensland. So we have 3 new cases, but 1 is in overseas and detected in hotel quarantine. 2 are locally acquired, and both of these were already detected in home quarantine, and they are linked to the Carindale daughter. So we have absolutely no concerns about these 2. So this is fantastic news. We have 49 active cases. We've done over 14,900 tests. So once again, if you're sick, stay at home and go get a test. So that's imperative. And 15,631 vaccines were delivered by Queensland Health yesterday. So that is absolutely fantastic news. So don't forget, tomorrow the QR code, the check-in app becomes mandatory. So you must check in at a whole range of cafes, restaurants, hairdressers. So please make sure you do that. It just makes our job for our contact tracers so much easier. So please continue to do that. And I want to give a big special shout out to the 10 staff at the Sunshine Coast University Hospital who went beyond everybody's expectations. I'm just so proud of them that they put their own lives at risk to go in and help a COVID positive patient who went into a anaphylactic shock, and they went in, they saved her life. I'm so proud. I'm proud of each and every one of them, so I thank them. I know that Queenslanders are proud of them as well. And of course, they'll go into isolation now because they just went in and did exactly what anyone who works in our health service would do. So congratulations to each and every one of them. It just happened so quickly. There was no hesitation. They just went in and helped out. And thankfully, the woman survived that particular episode. So I'll hand over to Dr. Young. Thanks.
Thank you, Premier. So 3 new cases overnight, 2 in home quarantine. So they went into home quarantine on the 2nd of July when we announced those 2 individuals in Carindale that were confirmed positive and are part of our Alpha cluster. So when they went into home quarantine, they tested negative. They've now tested positive, both of them. So we've just gone and done some further work, and they've had no public exposure sites. There is no risk there at all. And this is what we always want to see as a cluster evolves, that the positive cases are already in quarantine when they become positive. Then the 3rd case detected in hotel quarantine on day 1 of their stay, recent travel, returned from overseas. Now, the Sunshine Coast University incident that occurred, I do want to clarify that those 10 individuals involved were all wearing PPE. They just felt that their PPE might have been compromised because they were in such a rush to help that individual patient, who now, I'm glad to report, is no longer requiring ICU. So they've left ICU. They also, all 10 staff were vaccinated. One of them was just waiting for their 2nd dose of vaccine because it wasn't due yet. So that's also good. But despite that, because we're being very, very cautious with the Delta variant, which is what the patient does have, all 10 have gone into quarantine for 14 days and will be regularly tested in quarantine. Thank you.
I also want to thank these health workers. Not only were they wearing PPE, they were vaccinated. The moment the incident was over and this woman's life was safe, they immediately self-reported that they were concerned that their PPE might be compromised and sought advice as to whether they should be quarantining or not. So they have gone above and beyond. I want to thank them. I want to thank all of the health workers that work in COVID wards and around our hospitals because their jobs are not easy. And every time there is a transmission in a hospital, they feel like they're being targeted in their jobs. The fact is that health workers around the world have been infected by this virus no matter how careful they are, because it is highly contagious. And I want to thank those workers who do work in our wards, who do work around COVID patients and do put the lives of those patients and their care above their own and their families, which is why we've also said that we're happy to vaccinate the families of those working around COVID patients as well. And only yesterday I was told that this is very much welcomed by health workers, knowing that their families can stay safe as well. I want to report that at 1 a.m. tomorrow morning, the Queensland check-in app becomes mandatory, and I'm thrilled to say 72,305 businesses have registered just in the last 2 weeks. So everywhere I go, I'm seeing that check-in app up at our shopping centres, at individual stores. We thank all of those businesses. We thank their customers who are making sure they check in. We do remind any business, if you haven't registered yet, you need to register. We will have compliance officers going out and checking. And of course, as customers, if we don't see the check-in app, feel free to go up to management or staff and just say, have you got the check-in app, where we can use it, because it's about keeping everyone safe. I'm also pleased to say, while we work through the discussions with staff and stakeholders in relation to our 5 hospitals that look after COVID positive patients, that we are already seeing an uptake of additional health staff. We have once again put the message out that any health worker, no matter what their role in any of our hospitals, can come forward and get vaccinated straight away. That we've seen a 3% increase in just the last few days on the first doses, and a 5% increase on second doses. And at our COVID hospitals, we now have over 77% of the staff already got their first dose, and almost 69% have got their second dose, remembering a number of those staff won't be eligible for their second dose for some time, because some of them got the AstraZeneca before the ATAGI's advice changed. So really pleased with the increase in health workers coming forward voluntarily to get vaccinated. Again, we thank all of our health workers, particularly those at the Sunshine Coast University Hospital, who did what they're trained to do. They saved a life, and they put that life ahead of their own safety in what they did. And we're very, very grateful, and we know they're now going to spend 14 days in quarantine. And we're very grateful for their sacrifice in doing that, and their family. And can I also note, we have over 5,700 people home quarantining now. So can I put a shout out to those almost 6,000 people quarantining at home at the moment? Thank you for helping keep Queensland safe by complying with the quarantine directions.
Thank you and good morning. We are still seeing a number of people not wearing masks in our community. Yesterday we handed out 204. That brings the total since the restrictions came in to 1,149. So the message goes out there to people, please carry and wear your mask. I know we keep saying this, but please do that. We did see a couple of people not do the right thing. There was one person claiming to be a sovereign citizen in the Lockyer Valley, I think it was, who, despite repeated warnings, refused to wear a mask. And another male person at Dalby, despite being given several directions, continued to spit at police, which is a very unfortunate circumstance. So that person was fined as well. We intercepted 2,000 vehicles at our road borders, turned around none, so very high compliance there, thank you. At our domestic borders, we met we met 1,109 persons. 1 was refused entry, 16 into quarantine. Internationally, we had 228 arrivals yesterday, which brings our total in hotel quarantine to 3,137, including 2,282 internationals. Thank you.
But the two new cases overnight, you said previously said I linked to the daughter. How old is that?
Yep. One's 10 through to 19, and the other one's 20 through to 29. So in the decade of those ages.
Right, so one's a teenager.
Yeah, one's, well, 10 to 19, the other 20 to 29, in their 20s.
Dr. Young, yesterday we attended the Boat Hotel on the Gold Coast. It is a hotel which looks after flight attendants and flight crew that come come in from hotspots. We saw a cleaner there who wasn't wearing a mask, operating on several different floors. The driver driving the aircrew also wasn't wearing a mask in an enclosed space with the aircrew. Is there any circumstances where that could be acceptable?
This is not a Queensland Health or a Queensland Government quarantine hotel, so I'd need to get some more information.
Queensland Health has told us that that has been an approved hotel
No.
for aircrew.
No, it's not. No, so it hasn't been used as a Queensland Government hotel since the end of January.
We have a statement from Queensland Health which says that hotel has been...
I can only tell you the facts. And the facts are that it has not been used as a government hotel since the end of January. And I'm sure that the Deputy Commissioner can give you that information. Flight crew can quarantine at home. That's been allowable under the national protocol because we need planes to keep flying. So that's part of the national protocol.
Should there be cleaners in that hotel when these people are flown in from a hotspot, not wearing a mask? Is there any way that could be accepted?
People can live in their own accommodation when they've come in and they're part of flight crews. So that is part of the national protocol.
Cleaners who are cleaning their rooms,
I'm just saying...
rooms, aren't wearing a mask. That surely is a concern.
We're not involved in hotels that aren't quarantine hotels.
Dr. Young, just on another matter, there's a man in Sydney, I'm not sure if you've seen him this morning, Anthony McCormack, and he was trying to get back for his mother's funeral. Can you explain why he wasn't granted an exemption by Queensland Health?
I'm reluctant to give away people's private information, but I also saw that article. So yes, the article says that unfortunately his mother died last night and he only arrived in Australia, into Sydney, on the 6th of July, and we've been working with the New South Wales authorities to look at what can be done to assist him.
Was there not a way, though, that something could have been done to get him...
Well, we were working with them. He only just arrived, unfortunately. I mean, this is absolutely tragic that he's lost his mother so quickly.
Are you a question about that? Just that issue?
Sorry,
That issue of the McCormack family.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of these cases. We've covered the Killian family, the O'Day family, the McCormack family now. There's always a similar refrain from these families. They all say that the New South Wales government or other governments have been extraordinarily helpful and proactive and communicative. The Queensland Health has been, by comparison, cold and silent. They've always had to chase Queensland Health up. Are you comfortable with these people are saying that about the government you're running?
Look, what I've said very clear, and I think I said it either earlier this week or last week, is that we've actually gone about increasing the exemptions unit. And as Dr. Young said, there were a lot of proactive conversations that were happening with New South Wales. So what happens when a person flies into New South Wales? They need to get the clearance of the New South Wales government first, and then we can facilitate. And I think you saw that we actually did step in and help out a case recently. These are very tragic situations.
These families will say the same thing. They have to chase up Queensland constantly. If Queensland was letting them down, this is what they are saying.
Look, I can get you the figures, but I think there's people apply for, there's hundreds of exemptions that people are applying for, and they're trying to process them as quickly as possible, and that's exactly why I've asked there to be more people in that unit so we can actually speed up some of that. But it's not unique to Queensland. These issues are happening across the nation. We are in a global pandemic.
That's true. It's true, but the New South Wales...
Sorry?
Anthony's obviously going to get the same.
Oh, yeah. Look, our hearts go out to him. To lose someone so close is just awful. I mean, we all lose relatives. It's not nice, and it's not nice during a pandemic. I know that there's people overseas in other parts of the world too that sometimes families here can't go and get to see either. It's awful.
Do you think
Yeah.
the exemptions team is working to look after circumstances like these?
Well, they're trying their best. They're humans. They're trying their very best, and they realise that these are real people with real families, real issues. They're not just pieces of paper. They're people, and they're trying to process them and keep Queenslanders safe, but process them in a timely manner. And unfortunately, in this case, it just didn't occur in time.
To that point, These
Yeah.
people say they feel they are being treated like pieces of paper by the Queensland government, but not by other governments. That must upset you.
Well, I honestly believe that the people in the exemptions unit are trying their very, very best. They're trying their best.
But they didn't even reach out to this man. He said that New South Wales Health had called him repeatedly.
Because it was actually in the hands of New South Wales. My understanding was it was in the hands of New South Wales at the moment. They were progressing a test that he needed to complete, and then they were working with Queensland. So it was at the New South Wales stage. Look, I don't want to, I'm not apportioning blame here or anything. It is a tragic situation. You know, it would have been so nice if it didn't happen, but unfortunately, it just didn't.
Can you see why people are frustrated though? We're 18 months into this now, and we still.
And that's exactly right. We are 18 months into a world pandemic, and now we have these more contagious strains of Delta, and my understanding was they were progressing a test, right? So, you know, we don't know who's going into hotel quarantine who has the Delta strain. We have to test.
A question about vaccines, if that's okay.
Yes.
If we, by some miracle, had all of the vaccines that we could have ever wanted and hoped to arrive tomorrow, how long would it take for us to actually vaccinate the population?
Well, I'm not in charge of the rollout. That's the General who works for the federal government.
No,
So,
I mean, if the vaccines arrive, Queensland Health administers.
but they're not going to all arrive at once, Lydia. But that's not a correct question,
But when
because
they come in the last quarter of the year.
yeah, the
how long
last
will-
quarter of the year,
Yeah.
correct?
How
Yes.
long will
Let's
it take
talk
us-
facts. That's what we're being told. They're
Okay,
going to come in the
how long will it
last.
take us to
Yeah.
vaccinate everybody once we get all those vaccines in?
Well, we're working on that with the federal government at the moment. So we're looking at all different options. You would have seen they're talking to business leaders, they're talking to organisations. You know, we would roll out more. There's opportunities for more pharmacists to be involved, the more GP networks across the state. So this is all the planning that they're doing. You would have seen that big high-level meeting they had of the Army officials yesterday. AHPPC's doing their work, National Cabinet's doing their work. You know, once the supply, well, we have to wait on the guarantee of supply. It's a fundamental issue.
But so you're expecting that supply is going to come at the end of the year?
Sorry?
You're expecting that supply
Yeah,
to come in?
well, I think from memory, the Prime Minister has said he expects that everyone will be able to be offered a vaccine by the end of the year. I can only go on what the Prime Minister says. I'm not the General in charge of the vaccine rollout.
And when do you expect your replacement for Dr. Young to be announced?
Sorry?
When do you
The
expect-
position will be advertised.
Sorry?
Sorry?
The New South Wales Health Minister has suggested we might need to live with the virus. That's prompted WA to say that they're considering a permanent hard border with New South Wales. Is that something you would consider if New South Wales is going to live with it?
Look, I just think we need to see how New South Wales goes over the next week. They are working incredibly hard. We know that they've got good contact tracers. Dr. Young is in regular contact with Kerry Chant, you know, so we'll see what happens over the next week.
But they foreshadow they might not be able to control this outbreak and it could be in the community.
Well, let's see. We're watching it every day, just like everyone else
The
is.
Delta strain,
Yes.
Delta strain obviously is a big concern. The Virgin hostess who tested positive for that strain, a close contact of hers was an airline crew. They were directed, or they went into hotel isolation in that same flight hotel I just talked about with not wearing masks. They went in there and they stayed there for 4 days after being determined a close contact of that air hostess. How is that happening? Because there are other families in that
Well, they
hotel.
weren't. It's not a Queensland government hotel, so that's where the flight crew go on quarantine. So I'm quite sure they probably were put into their home isolation. I'm quite sure Dr. Young can get.
When he was identified
Yeah.
as a close contact, why wasn't he sent straight to quarantine?
But not all close contacts are sent to hotel quarantine. They can either quarantine in their place of residence, and it's only if it's deemed substantial that then they are asked to go into hotel quarantine.
He was sent there 4 days later. I was wondering why is that?
Well, they probably went through and they examine everything. So Queensland Health goes through a whole list and they check everything, and then they work out if they think someone is deemed to be of higher risk, and then you know, there might be some stricter requirements put on them. But this takes time. You know, this doesn't happen overnight. The contact tracers methodically work through everything to work those things out.
Dr. Young, can I
Sorry?
The Health Minister said this week that a legislative change to block that legal access with the check-in app could be rolled out if need be. What would
Sorry, in terms of the...
In terms of the check-in app and the...
Oh, in terms of the legislation. So the government's
Yeah.
looking at whether or not we need to do an amendment to the legislation or make a policy directive.
How will the next chief health officer be chosen?
It'll be advertised.
But who chooses it? Is it just you?
No, I think it's advertised through a process. Yeah.
Dr. Young, can I
Yep.
just double check? The
Yep.
staff who helped the COVID patient up in the Sunshine Coast, were they fully aware that they were dealing with a COVID positive patient?
I understand so, yes, but just remember, seconds count. So when someone has an anaphylactic reaction, and this was a very serious one, then you call a MET team, medical emergency team, and they run. I've been on many in my career when I was a doctor in a hospital, and you just run. You don't stop and check who you're dealing with. I can remember having to deal with cases that had HIV early on in the HIV pandemic, and you just treat the patient and sort it out afterwards. They were wearing PPE because I'd brought in instructions that people were following to wear PPE because I was worried about patients being in hospitals, of course, but they know that they acted so fast that they weren't confident that they hadn't compromised the PPE. So that's why they...
Just to confirm, sorry to get back to this, with that man in Sydney, the hold-up was he hadn't received a negative test through New South Wales Health.
He had a test done by New South Wales Health, and last night we had not received a result. I've asked this morning, I still haven't seen the result of that. So he needed to have a negative test before we could then organise a charter plane if that's what we were going to do. So it was just timing. It was very, very unfortunate that the lady died very quickly. It's sad, of course. Could I just mention, I apologise, I didn't mention these stats, and they might address some of the questions that I've heard asked. So today in Queensland, we have 5,791 people in home quarantine, and we have 3,137 in our hotels. So you can see, once you get an outbreak in the community, we can't put all of those people into hotels. We put some, so we've had up to 280 out of those home quarantine people go into hotels because the public health units have assessed that their home situation is such that it would be best they go into a hotel. For instance, maybe they live with a very vulnerable person, things like that. So, but the vast majority of people who acquire the infection in our community will quarantine at home. We don't put them into our hotels. So we're up to, as you heard yesterday, 9,827 contacts that we're monitoring. Not all of those are close contacts, so not all need to go into quarantine.
On that live hotel again, you mentioned before,
The
Dr. Young.
COVID patient, she was obviously called up, the COVID patient at some point was in nursing hall. She was called up in these latest outbreaks. Is she one of FIFOs?
No. She's one of our overseas acquired hotel quarantine cases, a Delta case. So she was transferred to the COVID ward, but she became unwell and needed some further tests done that couldn't be done in that ward. So she had to leave the ward for the tests, and she wore. The case, yes, that we've been talking about at the Sunshine Coast that led to these 10 workers to be quarantined. No, well, that's what they have to sort out, whether her symptoms were due to COVID or due to intercurrent illness. That's what they were working through. And they couldn't do those tests in the ward, so they had to take her out of the ward, and all of those staff that escorted her out of the ward, of course, they all had PPE. And then she had an adverse reaction to the dye that was used in the procedure, and that happens, and so they called the medical emergency team who arrived.
Virgin notified all their close contacts.
They
This
did.
man was part of a crew
Yeah.
of the 26th
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
flight.
So we
You didn't know
had-
the proper hotel quarantine until...
No, because we don't. So Virgin had that one case here in Queensland, and 250 contacts were identified, and those 250 contacts, I can't go down to, some of them might have been in hotel quarantine, but the vast majority were quarantining at home or their usual place of residence.
Yeah. So the Queensland Health has written to us saying the person was then identified by the public health unit as a close contact of a positive COVID-19 crew member.
Yep.
Was transferred to a quarantine hotel. This is normal process.
Yep. Yep.
Given that he was told he was a close contact 4 days prior to that transfer, why did it take 4 days for him to be transferred?
Because that's when they assessed that they thought he was better off being managed in a quarantine hotel rather than where he was. And that's what we do with 5,791 people.
Gotta go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, some experts November 2. November 2. Some experts on the health professional, they can't.